I am Quentin Collins, Assistant Director and an alum of the Solstice MFA in Creative Writing program at LaSalle University. As we open this virtual space, I would like to acknowledge that the territory on which LaSalle University stands is that of the Pawtucket and the Massachusetts people. LaSalle's campus is a place to honor and respect the history of the Native and Indigenous communities who continue to reside in the area currently known as Massachusetts, and the continued efforts of their community leaders to ensure that history is not oversimplified or lost. This statement is one small step in acknowledging the difficult history that brought us to reside on this land and to help us seek understanding of our place within that history. Ownership of land itself is a colonial concept, and we acknowledge that the ideal restorative measure is to return land to Native and Indigenous communities. The Solstice MFA program at LaSalle University seeks ways to be part of a better future going forward. As we grow, we pledge to seek out Native writers and for our faculty and guest faculty. And meanwhile, we have established the Debuse Fellowship for Native and Indigenous writers, which will be granted to an incoming Solstice student annually. We hope to inspire others to take action as well. One way you might do so is to consider a gift to the Native Land Conservancy based in the area currently known as Mashpee, Massachusetts. Welcome to our 2023 Writers Helping Writers fundraiser reading featuring our alums, Ellen Parent, Terese Schlachter, and Faye Snider. Since the beginning, the Solstice MFA program has committed itself to nurturing the diverse voices of America and beyond through not only a compassion-focused philosophy, but also need-based scholarships to help create more equitable paths to a graduate degree in creative writing. Through our Writers Helping Writers Scholarship Fund, we grant $1,000 awards to eligible students every semester, and each year we host this fundraiser to reaffirm our commitment to this mission. For 2023, our aim is to raise at least $5,000 to add to our fund by December 31st. So far in this campaign, we have collected more than $700. We hope to add even more to that total before we conclude this event tonight. All donations are tax deductible and directly benefit Solstice students. As we prepare to enter the season of giving, as well as consider our year-end charitable giving specifically, now is a great time to donate as little as $5 or even as much as $500 to our scholarship fund. Tonight, you will hear readings from our alums, Ellen, Terese, and Faye, who have all had recent or forthcoming books, as well as learn even more about our scholarships and the students they support. I will introduce each reader, and then they will read for a few minutes, and we will start with Terese. Terese Schlachter is the author of Finding Waypoints, A Warrior's Journey Towards Peace and Purpose, a work of creative nonfiction which tells the story of Colonel Gregory Gadsden's catastrophic wounding, recovery, and path to becoming a motivational speaker, most notably for the New York Giants when they defeated the New England Patriots in the 2008 Super Bowl. Terese is also chief storyteller at Ridgeback Communications, which specializes in video production in good, old-fashioned, well-written sentences. She holds an MFA from Solstice, and she's a 3-time Emmy Award-winning documentary producer and former senior producer for the Department of Defense. Before that, she covered politics and other mayhem for NBC News in Washington, D.C. Terese lives in the shady side of Maryland, enjoying views of the West River, along with her husband, John, and a beautiful and sassy, wait for it, Rhodesian Ridgeback dog. Welcome, Terese.
Thanks, Q. As he mentioned, I'll be reading from Finding Waypoints, A Warrior's Journey Towards Peace and Purpose. And I'm going to pick it up after the IED has exploded and gravely wounded the colonel. And they're bringing him to the first medical base. I guess I should give you a warning that it does get a little bit bloody when we're talking about how they're trying to save him. In the talk, Gibbs and the others listened incredulously, helplessly, as the driver and a Humvee full of security personnel, medic Eric Brown, and the gravely wounded Lieutenant Colonel Gadsden raced toward the gate of Fob Falcon. The truck blew past base security and screeched to a halt as close to the troop medical clinic as its wide berth would allow. Gibbs, who is Gadsden's commanding officer, along with his brigade sergeant major, Jim Champagne, raced out to meet it. The waiting crew had Gadsden on a stretcher in no time. Gibbs and Champagne grabbed handles closest to the lieutenant colonel's head to help carry him in. That's when they knew. That's when they all knew they could lose him. Let me see my legs. There's something wrong with my legs, Gadsden began to thrash again as they moved toward the TMC. He keeps trying to sit up, sir, Brown called to the colonel. Gibbs did his best to hold him back while helping to balance the gurney. Gadsden, stay down, Gibbs commanded. We need you to stay down. How bad am I? Just tell me. Gibbs glanced at Champagne. Champagne was tight with Gadsden, having spent hours with him at Fort Riley, training a unit of 3,500 soldiers as infantrymen. Champagne was depending on some of those exercises to guide him now. He leaned in, nearly nose to nose with Gadsden, trying to hold his gaze, but Gadsden did not seem to see him. I'm losing it, guys, Gadsden called out, feeling himself slip toward unconsciousness. You're not going anywhere, hollered Champagne. Champagne and Gibbs kept yelling, their raw voices scraping together, desperate for the sound to save him. They entered the medical unit. Gibbs held Gadsden's head, trying to keep him still and focused on anything but his legs. Gibbs spoke continuously about his troops, his duties, the mission, any damn thing. He looked around the room. Brown looked stricken. Their eyes met for a second. Brown's brimmed with tears. Oh, God, sir, I did what I thought. I didn't have anything else out there. You did good, Private, Gibbs interrupted. You did all you could. From inside the bubble of the TMC, Dr. Ross Witters could hear Gadsden's screams and took in a breath, preparing himself for yet another bloody tempest. Victims arrived daily, shot up by mortars or burned by bombs hurled inside the base. Others, like this one, were transported from Route 1, or Thunder Road, as he had come to call it. Bob Falcon was sitting on some dangerous dirt. Dr. Brian Derrick took the lead while the rest of the doc split duties, one monitoring breathing, another taking charge of Gadsden's right leg, Dr. Witters taking the left. Nurse Captain Eric Farreau was responsible for administering meds and fluids. Witters gasped at Gadsden's wounds, more because of what was not there than what was. Skin, muscle, and tissue no longer existed. All that hung from the bone was the sciatic nerve, or was it an artery? Witters could not even tell. There was blood oozing and gushing everywhere. He ripped at reams of gauze, pushing it hard into the back of the extremity, then desperately snatched spools of Kerlix bandage rolls, not bothering to unwind them, and packed half a dozen of them into what was left of the thigh. He was up to his elbow inside Gadsden's leg, sopping up as much of the gush as possible before drawing out his forearm and wrapping the packing with ace bandages. Witters knew his job was just to buy the man some time. Army Corps Captain Farreau took his place alongside Witters. Their fevered motions were perfectly choreographed, their hands moving almost mechanically across Gadsden's writhing body. They worked urgently, but with a businesslike air. Farreau doubled the tourniquets, smashing them up as close to the lieutenant colonel's groin as possible, knowing those limbs might be revived at the combat support hospital a short medevac away. He grabbed shears and shredded Gadsden's uniform from his body, working deftly to find a vein into which he could pump just enough fluid to keep the lieutenant colonel alive. Too much would exacerbate the bleeding. Farreau looked up long enough to notice the TMC had flooded with rank. Who was this guy? Farreau did not know this patient from any other, except that he was the most alive IED survivor the nurse had ever seen. Most came in unconscious, their battle buddies pleading for miracles. Gadsden, incredibly, seemed to be still in charge. I'm losing it, guys, Gadsden screamed again, commanding them to save his life. Farreau's latex gloves were covered in blood, making them too slippery to grasp anything. He tugged at Gadsden's right arm, desperate to remove the lieutenant colonel's leather glove, but his own filmy glove would not grip. Gadsden's screams were shrill. He was in excruciating pain. I need a fentanyl pop, Dr. Witters called. I can't see, Gadsden yelled. I'm fading. His deep howls chilled their own blood. Farreau fixated on the lieutenant colonel's glove, grasping, sliding. That is when Gadsden went silent. Then he turned to look Farreau dead in the eyes. How in the fuck are you going to save my life if you can't get that glove off? He delivered the line with the calm and panache of John Wayne fingering his pistol grip. Captain Farouk froze. He was being dressed down by a senior officer as much as he understood, one who was currently dying. This guy was some kind of badass. Farouk abruptly yanked the glove off, then found the accessory cephalic vein in the wounded officer's arm. Next, there were narcotics and oxygen. The lieutenant colonel calmed slightly. Farouk was not sure, as the golden hour ticked closer to its end, if the calming was much comfort. He glanced at Gibbs, his own commanding officer. Gibbs' normally smooth, creaseless face was lined and furrowed. Their eyes met for an eighth of a second. Gibbs' eyes flashed and focused back on Gadsden. There was blood everywhere, had to be more outside the lieutenant colonel's body than in. It had been a long time since Colonel Ricky Gibbs felt fear. "We're proud of you, Greg," Gibbs said. "Everyone talks about what a great job you're doing up there. We need to keep you on that command, you know? The people who live there, those families, they're going to be pissed if you don't come back." Gadsden was his thinker, his unfailing team player, his solid go-to battalion commander. But now Gadsden was not taking orders. He would not stop moving, but at least he had stopped swinging. He was growing weaker, his blood pressure dropping. Still, he tried to push himself up on his elbows. "You have to keep still. Stay still. Let these people work, Greg," Gibbs pleaded. "I'll try. I'm trying. Just don't let me die in Iraq, Colonel," Gadsden pleaded. "You won't die here. You won't." On the floor, Gibbs saw a fresh red boot print where someone had stepped in blood, leaving a morbid track. He wondered if he had just told a giant lie. "Tell Kim I love her," Gadsden said, as the sedative began to take hold. "I will, Colonel." Witters and the rest of the medical team turned over custody, knowing their work was the best they could offer, the best the medical field could supply. If Gadsden survived, he would be the most severely wounded person they had seen at Falcon to make it home. Gadsden, quieter now, was carried back outside and gingerly sat inside a Black Hawk medevac helicopter. Colonel Gibbs stepped in and took a seat beside him. It was a 10-minute flight to the Green Zone, the most secure area of Iraq, heavily guarded by coalition troops. There was a small hospital there, staffed by American military doctors. Gibbs continued to talk, yelling over the noise of the chopper. If he made staying alive an order, Gadsden might comply. Gibbs clasped his hand around Greg's and squeezed. Gadsden squeezed back. He was still alive. I'm going to skip ahead, and as you know, the colonel eventually loses both of his legs. And this is a scene where Lieutenant Colonel Gadsden first meets his wheelchair. The hum of hard rubber rolling on linoleum was nearly constant outside Greg's room on Ward 57. Everything in the hospital, it seemed, moved on a wheeled cart. He waited for the sound to fade, but instead it grew louder until it burst through his door, skimming each side of the door frame with oversized wheels. Bob Barr, his new physical therapist, was hanging on the handles, cornering the contraption toward his bed. It was a cart, all right, a cart for his butt. Greg stared, feeling the first tingle of this new love-hate relationship. The chair would mean freedom from this bed, this room, this ward, and maybe even from this hospital. But he may be tied to the chair itself, dependent on it, possibly for the rest of his life. Steel, a little black leather, and a cushion. Nothing he would ever really cozy up to. For some reason, he thought about his high school ride, the 1973 Camaro Rally Sport. Must be the chrome. Once again, he would be a lowrider. "Now, it's going to be a little awkward getting in at first," said Bob, radiating a perfunctory call. Bob had been through this a bunch of times. He had no doubt he could get Greg into his feet, and he was pretty sure he would do it without too much drama. Greg almost laughed. "A little awkward," he challenged. "You'll need to do some scooching, probably. It won't be as hard as it looks," said Bob with such a matter-of-fact attitude it was almost flippant. Greg was not sure, as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, he had ever been ordered to scooch. But Bob's casual attitude lowered the hurdle of intimidation, as it had helped when days earlier, Bob first made him lift his head from the pillow, then sit up in the bed for a single minute, then later for an hour. On those first visits, Bob cheated by raising the back of the bed to help him lean forward. But it was not long before he could sit on the edge of the bed with no support at all. Small steps physically, giant leaps emotionally. But this, Greg had known subconsciously this was coming. Still, it seemed a capitulation into a new existence, a new state of being. Staring down at the sterile cushion, getting his butt from the bed to the chair seemed about as likely as doing an aerial backflip. Actually, he thought the backflip might occur instantaneously, a collateral backflip. Have you ever gotten in a kayak? Bob didn't wait for an answer. It's like that. What you need to do is slide your rear end to the edge of the bed and get sort of parallel with the seat. I've got the chair and the brakes are on. It won't move. Greg did as he was told. He had to trust the chair. Okay, now grab the left arm of the chair with your left arm, lean out, hold steady, now slide toward it. It was an exercise in strength as well as trust. He landed slightly sideways, but solidly in the chair. Just a little bit of scooching around, and he was seated. And I would just like to read a couple of lines from my acknowledgments for the solstice fundraiser. Workshops and classes are valuable, but it's the people you meet there who hold you up. This project underwent extensive rehabilitation at the Solstice MFA program, formerly of Pine Manor College, but currently, thanks to Director Meg Carney and Assistant Director Quentin Collins, is thriving at LaSalle University in Boston. I walked away with a much better manuscript and a small herd of new writer friends and mentors like Anne-Marie Uman, who worked double time to help me put a bow on it, Battleship's biggest fan, David Yu, and Sterling Watson, who explained truth and the arc. Wild Women writer, literally, she wrote Wild Women, Autumn Stevens, and classmates Jen Grant and Ashley Johnson, you are my best takeaways. Joanne Carrata, whom I first met at Writers in Paradise, is the reason I signed up. So thank you, Solstice.
Thank you so much, Terese, for letting us hear so much from your book. And thank you for that awesome acknowledgement. We are just so thrilled. During my time as a student in Solstice, Terese started in my final residency. So we only got to cross paths briefly at that time, but we've had it many more times to connect throughout my tenure as assistant director. And thank you so much, Terese, for being part of this community. And so, yes, go ahead, Terese.
Just thanks for inviting me.
Of course.
You all.
And so, as Terese mentioned, the Solstice MFA program started in 2006 at Pine Manor College in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, which is not too far from our current home, LaSalle University. Since its founding, the program has maintained its mission to nurture all the voices of America and beyond. And a big part of that goal is to reduce the financial barriers to earning an MFA, which is why we offer these Writers Helping Writers scholarships. Too many talented writers put their writing life on hold because of these worries, and with your help, we want to continue to bring more of these dedicated artists into the Solstice community. See the link in the chat to donate now and support us in this mission. As our current student Jess McSwain says, the Writers Helping Writers Scholarship allows me to cast off the looming, overwhelming burden of finances, which means I can focus on my two loves, reading and writing. Finances should never be an obstacle for those who enjoy learning. So contribute now to help more writers like Jess join Solstice. And now we move on to our next reader, Ellen Parent. Ellen Parent has been telling stories since the mid-90s when she started whispering them down to her sister on the bottom bunk. Her debut novel, After the Fall, will be released in 2024, and I hear that maybe there's some cover art for that out in the world, a little rumor. Her poetry has been published in Bloodroot, Vermont Magazine, Birch Song, and elsewhere. She lives in rural Vermont with her delightful husband, her precocious daughter, and two eccentric cats. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you, Q and Meg, for having me. I'm really happy to be here supporting Solstice and encourage everybody to donate to the Writers Helping Writers Fund, which is obviously a really worthwhile cause. So I'm going to be reading from After the Fall, which is my forthcoming young adult novel, which will be released December 2nd of 2024. It's a post-apocalyptic novel set in Vermont, kind of after the end of the world, and the protagonist is a young woman named June. At the start of the book, she is living in a kind of isolated farming community, and she's waiting for her mom to return, who's been missing for years. I'm going to read from the beginning. 2 things made me finally leave the hollow, even though I should have left 100 times before. One was seeing Jacob again, and the other was the circus. I'd heard about the circus from old Bill, of all people, who spent most of his days riding a broken down old bicycle from place to place, begging work and being a nuisance. I came across him when I was walking back up the hill on the day of the storm. The squeak of his bike sounded through the woods from a ways off, so I had time to think about hiding somewhere till he passed. He wouldn't hurt me. He wasn't that kind of criminal, but he would try to talk to me, and that was almost worse. "Hey, June," I heard before I could find a spot to hide. I kept walking, waiting for him to catch up. We were in the poison parsnip field, and the tall, dry rods of dead parsnip rose up on either side of the path like the bars on a prison. I'd been digging parsnip root out of the muddy dirt for dinner, trying hard not to touch the stinging stems. Past the field, the mountains were gray walls with a little stubble of green at their feet. The sky overhead was gray too, and the parsnips swaying like there might be some weather on the way. I glanced up and saw low-bellied clouds to the north. Ever since the double winter, it seemed like storms were coming more and more often, like the end of the world wasn't hard enough already. Squeaking got closer and closer, and I ignored my body itching to run. No reason to run if you're not being chased. Still, I wondered how old Bill had lived this long, what with his way of showing up when he wasn't wanted. Finally, he slowed down beside me, his wispy gray rat tail blowing in the breeze. His bike was rusty red, and he kept the tires patched with pine pitch and his own sticky spit, probably. "Didn't you hear me calling?" he gasped, stepping off the bike and then rustling along to catch back up with me. "Hello, Bill," I said. My teeth were tingling like they wanted to bite. I pulled up my collar, just to make sure all my scars were out of sight. He knew about them, everyone knew, but that didn't mean I liked the staring. I wished I'd worn my mom's old jacket, but I'd left it behind on account of the day's warmth. Bill was wearing layers of patched sweaters with an oily sheepskin vest on top. It wasn't much different from what I wore, but my clothes didn't stink like his. I wondered if he avoided washing just for effect. Rounded out his scummy image nicely, I thought. He was the kind of tinker who'd clean off your solar panels or patch your roof on a good day, but who'd just as soon steal the tools from your shed if you didn't give him work. "Your parents up there?" he asked, eyeing me a little hungrily. He'd started looking at me different lately, in a way that made my hair stand up. Cyrus, whose family lived up above the stream and who thought I was going to be his wife one day, would have whacked old Bill on the head for what his eyes were doing. Cyrus didn't know that I'd take his sister over him any day, and neither did old Bill. "Your parents need anything?" old Bill insisted when I didn't answer. "They aren't my parents, and you know it." That's what I wanted to say, but I wasn't in the habit of saying what I thought. I had secrets, things no one knew about. I didn't ever say, "I'm not going to get married and stuck here forever." And I didn't ever say, "My mom is coming back for me, and then we're going to go somewhere you folks in the hollow probably can't even imagine." It was simpler not saying sometimes. "You can ask them yourself," is what I told old Bill. "I never seen you smile," he said next, just the kind of dumb thing he'd started saying recently. "Well, I don't drink like you do. What do you want me to smile about?" He laughed at that. "Just 'cause the world's over don't mean you can't smile," he said. A rod of poison parsnip got stuck in the spokes of his bike, and he stopped to get it out. I kept walking. When he caught up, we were almost to the house. I could see it through the broken woods. All the trees in this spot were dead, or almost dead, since the drought and the double winter a few years back. But new stuff was growing up in the woods, lots of kudzu and some hardwood saplings too. So the hollow wasn't done living yet. "You'd smile more if you saw the circus," old Bill said offhandedly, just loud enough for me to hear. "What circus?" "Oh, you're probably not that interested. Too busy moping around to—" "What circus?" I said again, louder and harder. I didn't think this was the effect he'd intended, but it made him answer. "A new one. Jeff Quigley said he's seen them in Dorset, and they's on a tour all the way up to Middlebury for town meeting. Jeff promised they was stopping in the borough. They got a fire eater and everything. I could take you if you like." It was always big news when something different happened in the Republic. Oftentimes it was something bad. A new strain of flu, a flood, another attack from the Yorkers. But every once in a while, like this time, it was something good. There were a couple of circuses that made the rounds in the Republic. Even hungry folks got starved for a laugh, and they'd pay what they could to see a show. The thing was, circuses almost always had more than just tricks and juggling to offer. Sometimes they traveled with a tinker. They deal with electricity and machines, and some people think they're in league with the devil. Sometimes it was a peddler, and that'd be good news for me because peddlers always had books to sell. But the really important thing that traveling circuses had was news, information from far away. They could tell you who they'd met and where, and that was more important than books. "Still got your little simpleton?" old Bill said, looking up at the house. Thomas was there by the edge of the porch, corncob pipe clenched in his mouth. He'd only just lost his last baby teeth. "That's funny coming from you," I wanted to say to old Bill, but I didn't say anything because sometimes keeping quiet made him go away. Thomas watched us from the edge of the house, and even though he didn't move an inch, I could tell he was happy to see me from the tilt of his head and the way his hand was half raised, almost a wave. He must have heard us coming and run around from the greenhouse where Bob had him picking slugs. I grinned up at him and he smiled back. "I can't see why old Bob and Denise keep taking in help that don't do no helping," Bill was saying. He'd taken a white plastic pill bottle out of his fanny pack and was trying to pry the lid off. "The Warrens, now they only bring on orphans that can lift 50 pounds, and they don't have no roof falling in or slug rot. What's the point of an orphan that don't work? What's the point of a dirty tramp that steals your hammer when he says he's going to patch your roof?" I waved up at Thomas, but Bill was still struggling with the pill bottle. I wondered if his finger joints hurt him. "You need help?" I asked half-heartedly. "Think you're stronger than me, orphan?" Bill cackled. "Damn thing's stuck." "Here," I said. I pulled it out of his hand and read the top of the lid. It says, "Push down and turn." I pushed the lid down and screwed it off. The motion made something uncomfortable flicker inside me, and I handed the bottle back quick. Memories sometimes happen to me like that, like shadows from an unexpected cloud. "Unnatural reading," Bill muttered, taking the pill bottle. "Thanks kindly." He shook a blue tab onto his palm. "Low tab dreams tonight. You want in?" I stepped away quick, wrapping my hands around my bag of parsnip roots. I gotta go. My voice was wary, but as I turned away, I'd already forgotten old Bill and his low tabs. I was going to the circus, and maybe they'd have the news I was looking for. The sky churned with wind and clouds above me as I walked up the yard. I'd been right about the weather coming. The darkening before a storm always made the world look different, like maybe you'd gotten lost and ended up somewhere you didn't belong, or like you were in a dream you wanted to wake up from. The windows of the house were dark. Denise hadn't lit any lamps yet, and its jumble of plastic siding and tacked-on sheet metal seemed as strange as it had the first night I laid eyes on it. The clearing was still littered with Bob's projects, too. A yellow car with the engine pulled out, a big brush pile, a half-built shed for the chickens. Thomas was the only change. I started up the steps, and old Bill turned his bike around. "Storm's coming, June. I guess I'll see you at the circus." I didn't answer. I climbed over the broken step and onto the porch. I wanted to run, but instead I just made a face at Thomas, who flicked his middle finger at old Bill's back. Okay, I'm going to read a small section a little bit later on, which is when June 1st comes across Jacob again. This is the same night once the storm has arrived. The man standing at the door was covered from head to foot in a black oilskin jacket, dripping with storm rain. Bob and Denise looked like plucked chickens next to him, both of them in their nightgowns and bare feet. The man looked from Bob to Denise. Then, before I could hide or do anything, he turned his face up to me on the stairs. I shivered. His eyes were shiny under the wool of his hat and scarf, and they got wide when they met mine. I tried to be still, tried to blend into the background like it said in the spycraft manual. My hair was covering my shoulders, so my scars were hidden. "Get that stuff off and leave it by the door," Denise whispered, her voice tight. The man didn't seem to hear her. He took a step forward toward me, his eyes still wide and locked onto mine. For that 1 second, time seemed to stop. Then Denise stepped in front of him. "Don't let the rain into the house," she said. The man blinked and looked down at her, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. He glanced up at me one last time, then nodded to Denise and stepped back. I stared at him, wondering what had made him look at me that way. He pulled back his hood and released the fastenings on his jacket. Underneath, he was wearing canvas pants and a clean wool shirt. Something silver gleamed on his chest, a little star. He looked about 40 to me, but not an easy 40. There's some people like that, like Denise, who are old even though they're not that old. The man's eyes were gray and his beard was gray, and he had lines so deep between his eyebrows that they seemed to have been carved into his face by the storm itself. But I didn't think about it for long, because as he came into the light, something new shifted in my memory. My heart started racing. "Don't worry, I'm perfectly dry," he said, and his voice was hoarse as if he hadn't talked in a long time. He unfastened a bag strapped across his chest and put it on the table, rolling his shoulders. Come in, Bob said. "Leave your wet things there," Denise said again. The man left his stuff on the ground by the door and followed Bob into the living room, Denise following after. I tensed as he came closer. Bob and Denise still didn't see me on the stairs, but the man glanced up again as he passed. He met my eyes for a second, but this time he looked away, as if my face had burnt him. The shadow in my memory shifted again. The man wasn't quite a stranger. I knew him. There it is. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Ellen. As much as I love praising Ellen, I still have a little hole in my heart for Ellen leaving us in the poetry workshop to go and be with the fiction folks. But I am always still so happy for this novel that she is going to be bringing into the world. And it's always awesome when you can see people work on things in the program and then see it become a book in the future. So Terese, Ellen, and Faye, who will read next, are part of our expansive alum network, including myself as well. And it has spanned not only the US, but also Canada. I see one of our Canadian contingents here in the audience, and even as far as Senegal. Much of the work that goes into maintaining and expanding the Solstice community comes from our alums, such as their volunteering in our recruiting efforts and supporting this annual Writers Helping Writers campaign. Whether or not they received a scholarship, they want to pay it forward for other writers who seek a community where they can grow their craft without envy or competition. So your contribution of $5, $10, $100, or even more can help more of them find their people and eventually join our alum ranks. Check out the chat for a link to donate now. And if you do make a donation during the reading, feel free to shout out your contribution amount. And now to our final reader, Faye Snider, one of, if not the most avid supporter of these campaigns. Faye Snider, MSW, MFA, graduated from Solstice. A former family therapist, she writes both poetry and creative nonfiction. A founder of the program's Alumni Association, Faye is fueled by the inspiration, collegiality, and mentorship of the Solstice community. She has published chapters on managing Holocaust antecedents in a therapeutic practice, as well as family and nature-focused poems in literary journals. She was the 2022 recipient of the Friends of the Chautauqua Writing Center writing contest for her poem, Cousin Louie. Her poetry chapbook, Seeking Grace, is forthcoming from Lily Poetry Press in December, so soon. Welcome, Faye.
Thank you. Thank you, Q, and thank you, Meg. And thank you all for coming. I can attest to how special and inclusive this program is. A worthwhile donation, for sure. Seeking Grace, a verse memoir. Dedicated to family, past, present, and future. Voice. Mornings, Maya comes to our bed, cuddles between us, chats, plans. She jumps every time the phone rings. If it's one of them, I say, don't call back. In time, she does the same. Proud as a vocalist singing her first solo, she is taking hold, her voice strong as a clarion bell. Prologue. Thieves of the spirit, their snake-like tongues twist words of love to capture a lonely girl longing for God's grace. Maya, I am your mother. I thought so long as God was involved, I didn't have to worry about it being a cult, you told me after. Now I understand. You needed to believe in yourself. Lure. Barely 20, in college, Maya joins new friends in the sanctuary room, where mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles smile, stroke her arms. The local pastor's words, "Welcome to the pages of the Holy Book as taught by Dorian, our leader. Your Jewish blood will bring us completion with Christ." Manifesto. While Dorian sings Marzi Dotes and Dozy Dotes and Little Lambs Eat Ivy, all around Maya, hands furiously transcribe his every word. She will have to listen harder. In the days that follow, her pen jots, scribbles, fills her brain's pages until she recites every chapter, every verse, just as he does. Dorian, salesman turned preacher, chosen by Jesus, baptized in liquid waves of love, and anointed, speaks for the Lord. Dorian's rules. Beware the godless. They are disciples of the devil. Beware our sister Martha, turned to the sin of laxity, suffered a car accident. Beware our brother Oliver, abandoned prayer with us, wasting with cancer. Beware you who lust in your automobiles will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I am your true preacher. Unbeknownst to her father and me, she traverses the worlds of her Jewish heritage and Dorian's teachings in the mission to gather the vulnerable. Those loners she hands tracts on street corners. Those innocent mothers who open their doors to the pretty young woman inviting them to give over their children to the Bible preacher. The ministry bus in wait at the curb. A willing exchange for a half day of childcare. Beware. In the cocoon of Dorian's kingdom, she rises before light. Wrapped in group prayers and trilling like a skylark, she chants his lyrics, her mind set to beware. She comes to believe our laxity lies in not knowing of Isaiah and the messianic promise that trust in Yahweh brings deliverance, while those who stray, suffer judgment and pain. Out of the blue, Maya visits. I lost God in high school. As a little girl, I prayed every night. Now that I've found him, I'm very happy. I don't understand why I never learned about Isaiah. It's a mistake not to read the New Testament. What is she saying? I did not come to what I'm about to tell you without a lot of thought and study. I've learned about Jesus. I believe in Jesus. I believe he is the Messiah the Jews have been waiting for. What is she saying? Mom, I know this is hard on you. That's why I waited and studied so hard. Read, you will see. You are a Jew. How can you believe in Jesus? I am a Jew and a Christian, a completed Jew. The first time Maya lost her voice. Overuse, too many rehearsals. After performing in West Side Story, voice raspy. Why can't I sing high notes anymore? Dear Maya, I write this in preparation for Rosh Hashanah. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you, the absent days, the moments of loneliness. the fear and upset with no arms to calm you. I'm sorry for the tenderness lost in time. Precious daughter, will you forgive my absence? As your mother, I should have known. So father decides a visit. Her father decides a visit, enters a makeshift sanctuary reminiscent of the storefront where he recited his bar mitzvah speech in Hebrew to people much the same. Maya, next to the pastor, renders a hymn in her bravura voice to Christ in Hebrew. The pastor tells him, if you read, if you pray with us, you will feel the same way. Where is our curious child? Why did Patty's daddy die? It was his heart. What's a bad heart? When someone is very sick. How does God make a rainbow? He plays with light. Where do frogs go in winter? They sleep in the pond muck. Have you ever found yourself? Have you ever found yourself in a maze, each corner turned, each sunlit path leading to another turn like that day in San Diego, far from our tangled daughter? We've come to explore a job offer, perhaps for both of us. Eyes smarting from her silence to my dear Maya letters. Her father tired of seeking experts, ready to leave the hurt of Maya's enchantment behind. On the beach, the sand hot on my feet, my gut curls with shock. My husband serious about this leap, a leap as shocking as Maya's. I will have no part of his turning. To embrace the West Coast, he must leave the East Coast and me behind. 2 days later, we are homeward bound. A place in between. When Grandma asks, what do you hear from her? I blame myself. Raised an Orthodox Jew, I've become modern and liberal, embraced prayer books with English, mixed meat and milk. When I can no longer bear the silence of Maya's voice, its sound a brook tumbling into my own sense of harmony, I phone, coffee in hand just before dressing for work and later, after dinner dishes until she answers, her voice trapped in surprise. Cautiously, I invite her. Cautiously, she agrees to meet. I cannot quite believe. The reunion. The shape of her body bloated in flesh of sallow patina. Her hair, once honey-colored, hangs dank, shrouds her glossy eyes. We greet as two strangers. Our conversation, the weather, until she leans in, speaks of a man, older, divorced, her friend in the no-touch tradition of Dorian's mission. They met by God's will on the ministry bus. She tells of a recent duck hunt, my gentle child wearing a bright orange vest, eager to gather bloodied creatures. What of Grandma, your brother, aunts, uncles, and cousins? They ask for you. They miss you. I haven't seen them in 2 years. They don't know me. We're not really family. Grandma, she asks for you all the time. I'll call her. I offer gifts, a pair of earrings, a soft sweatshirt, a journal, and Hanukkah wrap. Who are they from? Is that hope or relief when she takes in my words? From your father and me? Afterwards, alone on the highway, I sense the grasp of Dorian's tentacles, as if he's choked both of us. Days later, a letter. I know how scared you are about driving on the highway. And I think it is fantastic that you drove all the way to meet me. Journal entry, no call thus far. Will she call Grandma? Or will she shut out the light between the generations? Calling her back. Dr. Clark says Maya's personality, folded tight as a blossom in frost, could be a sign of her inability to choose, even to leave. If this is a destructive cult, she could be 30 before she awakens. Maintain the connection, no matter what. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that awesome reading, Faye. And thank you again for always being such a fervent member of the Solstice community. Faye is at every single residency, every single one in one form or another, whether it's virtually or in person. So thank you so much, Faye.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure.
And now, while this event is coming to a close, our Writers Helping Writers fundraising campaign runs through the end of the year. So you still have time to contribute and to join us in our commitment to foster the next generation of writers. Visit the link in the chat to donate. You can also support the campaign by encouraging others to contribute. So share the link with friends, family, and colleagues via email, online, and elsewhere to help us meet our goal of $5,000 by December 31st. And stay tuned to our social media where we will have updates about how much we've raised as we work toward it. And now, thank you again to Ellen, Terese, and Faye for your wonderful readings and your support of the Scholarship Fund and our peers who will soon be joining us as alum. And thank you all as well for joining us tonight and for your contributions. And a final big thanks to Meg for holding it down with the Zoom backend. So thank you all. Have a safe and great rest of the night, and we will see you soon.